This is a video specially made for flat-feet runners, or those who need a bit of extra guidance. Sometimes, I come across unforgettable clips on social media, runners struggling painfully on the race because they picked the wrong shoes. I don't know how their ankles held up after the marathon, but just watching made me wince. Running should be about health. In my comments section, there's a runner in his 60s still active in ultra marathons. I truly respect him because injury-free running, lasting into old age, is my goal too. Hopefully, this video helps some runners stay healthier. Today, let's talk about the 361 degrees Fierce Max and the Qiaodan Huanying 2 from the perspective of a neutral runner. I created this channel to review running products from Chinese brands and improve my English speaking. Before I get into my thoughts on the 361 degrees Fierce Max and the Qiaodan Huanying 2, I do want to go over some disclosures. No one's paying me to make this video, and I bought these pairs with my own money. Money doesn't grow on trees, so I will say what I have to say. Okay, before diving in, I noticed the Qiaodan markets this shoe as wide overseas. Maybe it's because the first-gen Huanying sold poorly, so they changed the name. But the design still clearly marks it as the Huanying 2, so I will stick with the name. Okay, let's get into the specs. The Fierce Max has a 25mm forefoot stack and the 31mm at the heel, with a 6mm drop. The Qiaodan Huanying 2 has a 24mm forefoot and a 32mm heel, with an 8mm drop. Personally, my feel differs from the official numbers. The Huanying 2's drop feels like 6mm too. Both shoes have almost no sidewalls in the forefoot, and their insoles are similarly thick. So I suspect the stack height numbers might not be fully accurate. No matter how you look at it, the Fierce Max forefoot seems way thicker than just 1mm over the Huanying 2. Both are size 45. The Huanying 2 weighs 278 grams, while the Fierce Max comes in at 318 grams. The Huanying 2 fits true to size, like most Chinese brands I've worn. The Fierce Max runs small. I'd suggest at least half a size up. For reference, I usually wear 45 in Chinese brands and 46 in Hoka and New Balance. After the basics, let's take a look at the details. Both uppers are single-layer jacquard mesh, which is breathable and great for summer. However, the Fierce Max's upper looks a bit cheap. Maybe it's just this colorway, and it might not show clearly in the video. The Fierce Max tongue has no padding, making it more breathable than the Huanying 2's. The heel collar has more padding on the Fierce Max, giving it that Max vibe. Its heel counter also feels firmer. Both shoes performed well without heel lifting and felt comfortable during runs. Both are very roomy and friendly for wide feet. There's plenty of space. And when I say space, my feet feel like they are floating in the Fierce Max. It's definitely wider than international brands' 2E offerings. Now, the midsole, this is the highlight. The reason these two stood out after multiple rounds of buying and returning other shoes. The secret sauce in the Fierce Max is the Extreme Light foam. The name shares a connection with the CQT Extreme in the Furious Future 2. Both use an embryo foaming process, but CQT Extreme is PIBA-based, while the Extreme Light is the TPEE blend-based. It's definitely not as high-performing as the foam in the Furious Future 2, but you get a lot of squish that's beyond what you'd expect from a budget shoe. The green part at the heel is EVA, which combines with the top layer of the Extreme Light foam to create a dual density setup. Dual density means that there's two different hardness of foam. From this angle, you can see some design details. The green EVA is raised on the medial side, and sandwiched between the foam layer is an orange plastic piece for extra support. All of these elements work together to offer impressive heel stability when landing. So, what's the secret sauce for Qiaodan Huanying 2? that would be the top layer of Kung Fu Pro HP foam. Qiaodan usually reserves HP foam for racing shoes like PB and the Plaid series. Unlike the Fierce Max, the Huanyin 2's high-density EVA base isn't just in the heel. From the official images, it's like they used the EVA as the rim and the Kung Fu Pro HP foam as the core, packing a super foam inside an EVA frame. The design instantly reminded me of the Saucony Tempest. I think the Huanyin 2 borrowed quite a bit from it. Qiaodan took some key lessons from a great shoe. With this midsole setup, I feel like I'm not being overly corrected in my stride. I think the beauty of the midsole setup is that the stability elements are quite subtle. I just have a nice, solid, stable platform. Moving to the outsole, the Fierce Max uses traditional rubber, while the Huanyin 2 has a CPU outsole. After about 30 kilometers each, the Fierce Max durability isn't far behind the Huanyin 2's. Coincidentally, it rained a lot during this review period. Both shoes provide a reliable grip on wet surfaces, although both had a slight slip on certain types of ground, but it's not significant enough to highlight as a downside. With that out of the way, let's talk about the pros and cons of actually running in them. The good and bad sides of the Fierce Max are closely tied to the setup of its midsole. For midfoot and forefoot strikers, most of your gait cycle is basically going through that white extreme light foam. It's super soft and gives great cushioning, really absorbing the impact from the ground. It's an enjoyable ride. The main downside comes from how the midsole is set up with different density foams at forefoot and heel. In the upcoming footage, keep an eye on my left foot, which has a very slight overpronation. When I land on my heel, the stability here is spot on. But when I switch back to my usual midfoot strike, each step shows visible arch collapse. This happens because the shape of the green part. Honestly, this shoe borrows quite a bit from Hoka in my opinion. Arahi is Hoka's stability shoe, using what they called a J-frame, an EVA sport frame. Fierce Max's EVA part looks like a smaller or a baby version of that J-frame. It doesn't extend forward as much as the one in the Arahi does. That might be why there is collapse with a midfoot strike. On the flip side, heel strikers won't have to worry about stability. This shoe is basically a hybrid, a neutral forefoot and midfoot shoe combined with a heel stability shoe. When I first unboxed this, my quick thought was that heavier runners might bottom out the forefoot foam over long distance. Unfortunately, it's against my big toe. The longest run I did was 13 kilometers. Based on my experience, I'd say this shoe should hold up fine up to 20 kilometers, especially for heel strikers, because the first point of contact is the densest part of the shoe. Let's move on to the Huanyin 2. Earlier, I mentioned it that during my stride, I'm not getting totally corrected. We understand that the foot goes in all different directions, so we don't necessarily need to force it. But we can sometimes help people stay a little more in the middle, which the middle can mean a lot of different things for different people. After recent runs, I'd rather call Huanyin 2 a guidance shoe instead of a stability shoe. It's one of those more modern stability shoes set up that I think even if you don't need it for stability, it's got a nice solid platform. It feels soft enough and feels like there is a nice level of rebound as well. It really does let you pick up the pace a bit more, and it's closer to a neutral shoe. I think it's an amazing way to give support. Not sure how many audience have last year's Hoka Mach X. To me, Huanyin 2 feels very similar. It has slightly less rebound than the Mach X because its top layer of the super foam isn't as thick. The Huanyin 2 feels like a Mach X with extra guidance. As for the downside, there was some irritations in the forefoot flex point during the first 20-kilometer break-in period. A little painful at times, but it went away after that. While wrapping up this video, I want to compare this with other shoes from the earlier part of the video. You probably noticed these two aren't direct replacements for each other. The Huanyin 2 is 40 grams lighter than the Fierce Max and can handle faster paces. Within the stability category, Fierce Max is more like a max stability shoe, while Huanyin 2 fits better as a regular or second-tier stability shoe, similar to the difference between Kayano and the GT 2000 from ASICS. Before comparing, it's worth noting how the Kayano changed after 30th iteration. Pre-30, it followed the traditional stability design, a harder foam or plastic piece on the inner side to resist the compression. Many brands still use this method like Mizuno and the upcoming X-Tab 2000 km Plus. Post-30, Kayano took the opposite. They placed a soft foam on the inner side, called it the 4D guidance system. This is a very bouncy foam, so once you roll in, it's going to bounce you back up. For overpernators, this works great, but for someone who underpernates, it's a disaster. A underpernator from local running club, I asked him for a photo of his running shoe, and from the wear pattern, you can clearly see why post-30 Kayano is a nightmare for underpernators. Comparing similarly max stability shoes like Kayano 32 and Fierce Max, both offer lots of cushioning, and the Fierce Max feels slightly softer in the forefoot and midfoot compared to the Kayano 32. However, heel feels quite different. The big density gap between white and green foams of the Fierce Max makes the transition less smooth than Kayano 32. Stability-wise, Kayano 32 wins again, because the Fierce Max is essentially a hybrid, neutral in the front, stable in the back. Next, unsurprisingly, the comparison to Huanyin 2 is Saucony Tempus 2. As I mentioned earlier, I think Huanyin 2 borrowed quite a bit from Tempus. They both combine their own superfoam with EVA. Tempus 2 leans firmer and responds quicker, while the Huanyin 2 feels softer and cushy. Tempus 2 can handle faster paces, like your marathon pace, or faster repeats. Huanyin 2 shines in daily miles and tempo runs. They are aimed to balance performance with stability elements, giving runners that want a sportive ride and train comfortably across different sessions. Back to the 361 degrees Fierce Max and the Qiaodan Huanyin 2. One of the reasons I'm positive about these two is their official descriptions match reality. Let's look at a less accurate example. Step 2000 km Plus. In my opinion, calling a $50 shoe a flagship is awkward. What does that leave for their pricer models? As I mentioned in my others video, Step has two running shoe departments, Step Running and Step E-commerce. The 2000 km line comes from the latter. The way they market their products makes it seem like these departments don't communicate. Anyone who's worked in a big company knows what I mean. The 2000 km Plus itself isn't bad. It keeps the feel of 2000 km 3.0 with similar softness, but more stack height without getting softer. It uses the traditional stability method, that non-compressible plastic piece we discussed earlier. The biggest upgrade is the premium look, which I will admit justifies the flagship label a bit. Overall, it's a solid easy run shoes with stability. Lastly, let's talk about the 361 degrees Fierce 5. Their description as a commuter shoe isn't quite right. Since the 3rd gen, the Fierce line has had decent stability, and the 5 improves it further, especially with raised arch support and a higher inner heel EVA layer. In my view, Fierce 5 also borrows a lot from Hoka Mach X. Put them side by side, and you will see the resemblance. Huanyin 2 matches Mach X in ride feel, while Fierce 5 looks more similar visually. As midfoot strikers, I'm not a fan. It's firm and lacks rebound. Heel strikers might have a different experience. Fierce 5 actually delivers decent bounce at heel striking for a $50 shoe. I think it's a stability daily trainer that's best for heel strikers and heavier runners. Just a heads up, you've got to try on first. It might press or touch your arch uncomfortably, specifically near the letter C on your left foot. If I take a rough, not too serious, without the categories like max stability, regular stability, or guidance shoes, just line them all up from softest to firmest, the order will be. Actually, the 3 shoes on the left are all soft, while the 3 on the right are firmer, and the 2000 kilometers plus and Tempest 2 are very close to each other. And in terms of weight from lightest to heaviest, the order will be. So, my final thoughts: for tempo runs, both Fierce 5 and Huanyin 2 work. But since Fierce 5 prefers specific foot strikes, Huanyin 2 gets the edge. Between 2000 kilometers plus and Fierce Max, they are close in weight and price. For LSD runs, Fierce Max win. More cushioning, more bounce. But if you have serious flat feet, the 2000 kilometers plus is the choice. This video is quite long because I wanted to cover as many details as possible. I hope it helped runners understand midsole setups in stability shoes, making it easier for you to choose the right one in the future. As always, let me know in the comments if you have any questions about these shoes or tips for improving English speaking. Thanks for watching all the way through. I'll bring you more about Chinese running products. Please follow me and hope you a good one.